तो ਹੁਣ 4.5 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਆ and he just tore us apart.
When somebody actually starts suffering and then either ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਲੇ ਦੁਆਲੇ ਆ ਚੁੱਪ ਹੀ ਕਰ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ and it's still kind of, we're not breaking that taboo. I think we still got a lot more work to do.
Just a taboo thing in our community, some of them still do not understand.
ਜਿਹੜੇ
ਸਿਆਣੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਐਦਾ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਪਾਗਲ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਉਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਗਲਤ ਹੈ
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪਾਗਲ ਬਾਜਾ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ
ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਗਲਤ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਖੀਰ ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ we should be supporting them, we should be helping them.
Did she let on that, yeah, cool, I've had a real hard day at work today?
Yeah. That's the reason we lost her. Yeah. It was because she had a nervous breakdown, because she was so stressed at work and worked this high pressure job and was helping everybody else but herself.
So when people call us, we believe that there's a part of them that still wants to live because they're reaching out and getting the support that they need.
The thing about suicide is it's really complicated, it's really complex, and the cause isn't the same in any two people.
Quite often it's just talking to us. We hope just talking to us, it could halve your problem and you could see things differently to the way you were seeing them when you was trying to figure it out by yourself.
Suicide perhaps isn't a way out of debt. It doesn't guarantee anything, right?
No, and often people take out insurance policies, thinking that once they've taken their lives, the insurance policy will pay out to their loved ones.
Please, if you think that, if you're thinking suicide might be a way out of debt, or that's not the case, we've already heard that your debt gets put into your estate.
People are saying, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੋ, start talking about it. But still there's that barrier and there's that level of feeling ashamed.
Yeah, a feeling of failure. I think they feel that if you admit that ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਜ਼ੋਰੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ, if you admit it, you're a failure.
They don't see the signs and that's hard because where does the blame lie? Is it the person that's died? Is it the relatives that missed out on those signs that you look back on and think, actually I could have noticed that?
Yeah.
Or is it professionals if they were involved?
And for so many people, when all these things are going on in their life, they think that suicide may be an option for them.
It's a shame that people just carry that much weight around with them, and it's
they don't need to.
They don't need to. There's no need.
They don't need
just open up, just talk.
Don't feel you're alone.
Right.
We all are here to help and support you, and a lot of people are going through it. It's important to talk.
To be honest, I won't wish this on my worst enemy. Sometimes I get angry with God.
ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਖੋਜ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਟੱਡੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਜੀ ਉਹਦੀ. We need to study something to get down to the depths of it, to find out about causes and to understand it. And there's no one better to study stuff than professors. So our guest now is a renowned professor from the University of Manchester who's done a lot of research, over 300 papers, written books about the topic that we're discussing today, and will explain to us the data and in depth a bit more about it so we can get to know about what suicide is, what are the causes, what are the symptoms, what are the treatments, and what we can do to try and prevent it. Professor Nav Kapoor, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
And you've done extensive research into this. I think that's an understatement. You spent a great part of your career studying about this. So let's ask the basic, obvious questions, as in, what is suicide?
So suicide, the way we understand it, is it's the act of deliberately taking one's life, and that's a fairly kind of universal definition across the world. The way we actually record suicide is, sadly, when a death occurs, it gets investigated by the coroners and then kind of gets incorporated into official statistics. And you're right, I've spent 20 or 30 years studying this area. And one of the really important things to always remember is, behind all the statistics, there are individual people with families, friends, and others who are left behind. So we never lose sight of that, even when we're doing our research. It's an intensely individual experience.
We've recently seen a spate of suicides, we can say, in the Asian communities, and not only here, but it's quite common back home. So probably more than what it is here. What are the causes of suicide, and what are the trigger points, and are there any specific to the Asian community?
That's a really great question, and one of the things we do know about suicide is it does kind of vary over time. So sometimes, thankfully, it's less common. At other times, it goes up. And in terms of where we are at the moment, certainly in the UK, it's has been a historic low for quite a number of years. Mm-hmm. But, from time to time it will increase. So it increases when there are economic difficulties, people are in financial hardship. That's a time, certainly in the UK, that we saw rates rise. And it's similar in India as well. Some of the suicide deaths recently in India have been in relation to economic difficulties. I'm thinking about, in the farming community and other places. So economic factors are an important cause, but the thing about suicide is it's really complicated, it's really complex, and the cause isn't the same in any two people. Some of the things we know about from researchers, some of the things that you're born with can make you more vulnerable. So genetic factors, things that happen to people early on in their childhood. So we know people who've had maybe difficult childhoods have a greater risk of suicide later in life. Things like illnesses as well, that can contribute to suicide.
What's the difference between suicidal thoughts and suicidal behaviour? Because someone like me, I would think, there's no difference. It means the same thing, doesn't it? So a layman might be out there thinking, what's the difference between that?
Well, the first thing is suicidal thoughts are actually quite common. Probably, 1 in 10 to 1 in 5 of us will actually experience suicidal thoughts. That frequent. When I'm talking about suicidal thoughts, that's, it can range from, my life isn't worth living, to, actually plans. Yeah, I've had enough, the kind of fatigue, being fed up, to actually, thinking about, make planning, and even for some people, it translates into behaviour. So suicidal thoughts are quite common. The vast majority of people who, suffer with depression or even suicidal thoughts won't go on to hurt themselves. We tend to call it self-harm when someone hurts themselves by maybe taking medication, or sometimes cutting themselves or injuring themselves in another way. So most people with suicidal thoughts won't self-harm, and most people with self-harm won't die by suicide. So it's only sometimes we talk about the iceberg of suicidal behaviour. So the tip of the iceberg, the most serious bit of the iceberg, are people who die by suicide, but self-harm is kind of underneath that, and then just mental distress is kind of underneath that. So it's about tackling every bit of that iceberg.
Is there anything specific to Asian communities which perhaps isn't there in other communities, or is there any added pressures which you've noticed in your research the Asian community has or puts on themselves which perhaps other communities don't do?
One of the really surprising things is that in ethnic minority groups generally, specifically in South Asian communities, there hasn't been a lot of specific research in that area, and it might surprise people to know that actually in this country, ethnicity isn't recorded. When someone sadly dies by suicide, ethnicity isn't generally recorded. So actually, in terms of the research, up until recently, we didn't know. Now, last year, what some of the government statisticians did, what some of the scientists did, where they looked at the census data and they linked that up with the death data. So we do know a little more than we did. But, that's surprising. If someone dies, you don't routinely record their ethnicity. That's kind of hampered research. Having said that, we've done other types of research. We've also looked at people who've hurt themselves. Yeah. And some of the factors, do vary a little. So in one of our bits of research where we looked at self-harm up in Manchester, the precipitants, the things that came immediately before, things like family problems and relationship problems were more common in people from a South Asian background than people from a white background. Things like financial difficulties were more common in people from white backgrounds than South Asian backgrounds. So there are these differences, but I think we need to do more, further research to kind of understand that.
Do you think as Asians we put a lot of pressure on ourselves? I mean, I'm just talking about my life generally, and perhaps probably every Asian sitting at home can identify with it, but you can probably as well. Pressure to get an education, the pressure of passing, the fear of failing and you're not going to end up good at anything. If our parents are uneducated, then the added pressure of you need to get an education. We don't want you doing what we did. We don't want you on a production line at Ford Motor Company in Dagenham, like my dad was here. My dad would say that and map your career out for you. Then the pressure to get married. Then the pressure, if you're a certain age, so if you go over 30 and you're not married, oh my God, you're not going to marry, calamity, disaster. Then the pressure to have kids. You've got to have kids on time. There's no point having kids when you're 45 like I did. Or like when I'm in my 40s and my kid's 3, oh, you're going to have to live longer for them. You want to see them married, you want to see their kids. Do you think there's an added sort of thing? And when I look around at other communities, they don't sort of have that pressure. Like none of the kids that I grew up with in my class, they didn't sort of have that pressure.
You're absolutely spot on that. This kind of pressure on kids, on young people, definitely has an impact on mental health. Definitely, sadly, has an impact on suicidal behaviours, suicidal thoughts, actual suicide. So I think family pressures, educational pressures definitely do. Some of that may be specific to the South Asian community, but it's across the world. So one of the things we know is that you've got high suicide rates in some countries in the Far East. So South Korea, Japan, and some of those similar cultural factors might be operating there. But you're absolutely spot on that. This kind of thing, mental health isn't quite the same everywhere, and we need to take into account those contextual factors when we need to do something about it, and doing something about it is really important.
What does the data tell us? Is there a certain specific gender or a type of group or people who may be already unwell that are more likely to take their own life? Or, is there no such data really to support that facts? I mean, you've done a lot of research on this.
There's lots of data around that. So some of the headline findings are men are 3 times more likely to take their lives than women. Wow. And that is a finding that's across the world, in every country in the world, apart from bits of rural India and bits of rural China, where actually the rates are a bit higher in women. And that's possibly to do with methods of suicide, but it's a change. But men are more likely. Now, the big question is, why are men more likely?
That's exactly what we're asking.
So we think, we don't know for certain, but we think that the first thing is it's partly about help seeking. So, as a man, if I become kind of physically or psychologically unwell, I'm much less likely to reach out for help than my wife than women. In general, men are poorer at seeking help.
Is that just our upbringing, or the sort of thing that we're brought up with, like, even just the phrase, be a man up, take the burden, you can't show any weakness.
I think partly, that what you're talking about is kind of masculinity.
That's
people
right, yeah.
People talk about toxic masculinity these days, don't they? So partly I think it's that. Partly it's because men, when they're in distress, do other things. So, they might misuse alcohol or, engage in kind of other behaviours. So, it's that kind of thing. It's what men do when they're distressed, and unfortunately they're less good at seeking help. The other thing is they have maybe more of the kind of risk factors for suicide and suicidal behaviour. So things like, when there's economic factors, it tends to affect men more than women. And then the third thing is sometimes when men hurt themselves, they do so in more violent or dangerous ways. So, that's also a factor. So men are 3 times more likely than women. And here in this country, the peak age, if you like, is midlife, and especially men in midlife. But in India and in other parts of the world, it's kind of tends to be younger age groups. So it's not the same. It's not the same everywhere.
How do we treat suicidal behaviour or suicidal thoughts? Is there a cure for it? What's the treatment for it? it's, you know, it's not conventional treatment, you know, that I can go and pop a pill for it, or is there one available? I mean, how is someone to treat this?
That's a great question, and you know, it's almost we start with the prevention rather than the cure. So, what do we do to prevent suicide? Well, you know, there are lots of things we can do. Some of the most important are taking care of people's mental health, and that's not just individuals like you and me, it's across the whole population. So how do we make sure people are as happy as they can be? That's about the basics of life. That's that's about having enough to eat. That's not such a problem in the UK, but you know, having enough to eat, deprivation, poverty, making sure everyone's living to a kind of acceptable level, reducing some of those inequalities. So some of this isn't something for you to do, something for me to do. It's about what governments have to do. It's about social policy. But the other things that we can do to prevent suicide are thinking about, well, what are the causes of suicide and what can we do about those causes? So one of the most important causes, and we've kind of talked a bit about it before, is psychiatric illness, mental health problems, especially depression. Now, most people with depression won't hurt themselves or die by suicide, but it is a risk factor.
Right.
So one of the things we can do is, if someone's low in their mood, if someone's depressed, getting them the help they need. And millions of scientific studies, lots of scientific studies show what's effective for someone who might be depressed. That ranges everything from self-help to exercise. It's a really evidence-based, lots of science on that, through to talking treatments. So lots of different types of talking treatments where people explore their thoughts, feelings and behaviours, or maybe explore their relationships with other people, or actually look back and think, what's caused this? Why am I where I'm at now? So taking a kind of developmental approach. So those talking treatments are really important. But the other thing is medication. I'm a psychiatrist, so I have prescribed medication in the past. Sometimes medication gets a really bad pressure. People say, don't want to take medication, It's addictive, it's going to make me worse. I've read all kinds of things about it. Medication can be life-saving, and I'm not, sometimes people say, all doctors are paid by drug companies. We're not paid by drug companies. None of our research is funded by drug companies. And I chair, in one of my other roles, I chair the clinical guidelines, the national guidelines for depression. And we looked at lots of studies, we looked at them impartially, and they do reduce depression and can be life-saving. But we want to give people a choice, talking treatments, medication. Talking treatments are right for some people, medication's right for others. But those things can treat depression.
Myths, because people must come to you with those myths. You must have encountered them in your research.
Absolutely, the myths are really important, and the language is important as well. So sometimes, even now, I'll slip into, commit suicide. That's interesting, that word, commit, because it actually harks back to before 1961 in this country, where suicide was illegal. Exactly. And that's why it becomes commit suicide. So I use died by suicide generally when I chat about it. The surprising thing is suicide is still illegal in 40 countries in the world. Still illegal.
So still criminalised.
Still criminalised in 40 countries in the world. And so, those myths that you've just talked about are really important to kind of grab hold of and debunk. That's what we need to do.
Hence the word commit in itself is a myth, and it's almost like you're punishing someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and saying who's already, upset and dukkhi and in a state, of disarray. And on top of that, you're saying, well, we're using such language to...
Absolutely, so spot on, because a lot of those myths we've just talked about are to do with stigma. The stigma of mental illness, we don't want to talk about, to do with the stigma of suicide. And, through kind of chatting about it, we'll reduce that stigma and get to the heart of those myths. But, there's a couple there that really need addressing. So this idea that if you talk about suicide, you're going to put the idea into someone's head, absolutely not. What the research shows, if someone's feeling distressed, if someone's feeling like, they don't want to be around anymore, actually talking to them is helpful. It helps rather than puts the idea into people's heads. And the other thing I think that's really important is when someone expresses distress or expresses ideas that they don't want to be around anymore, we take them very, very seriously. I think we take them very seriously and make sure that people access help. That can be health service help, that can be friends, that can be family. It's about whatever helps those. Because the other thing we know, for people who might be feeling, distressed, for people who might be feeling suicidal, is these feelings pass. I've talked to many people who've been, in the depths of despair, and those feelings pass. People get better. And I think that message of hope is really important.
Any message you are keen to get out to our viewers now? If someone's watching this program, they're having suicidal thoughts, or they're thinking they're at that stage that we mentioned earlier, that they've had enough, they can't go on. What is your message to them?
I think the first message is, you're feeling distressed, you can't see where the hope might be coming from, but actually you will feel better. This is something that you will recover from. And when people are in the depths of despair, when I've talked to people who've been really, really upset, really unwell, they can't see that, but just trying to get the message through that it will pass. And then if you can, talking to them, listening, just hearing what they're saying, connecting with their emotions, but getting them to seek the help they need. That might be through health services, that might be through family, that might be through friends, that might be through religious leaders, that might be through social services. Lots of help is out there, but when someone's really distressed, they sometimes can't take that step, and sometimes those of us who love them, those of us who are around them, need to help them take that step.
Professor Kapoor, thank you very much. You really shed a lot of light on this topic, and I know it's a tough topic to talk about, but for studying it for 20, 30 years, it's great to hear your insight, and hope we do more research into it. And thank you for enlightening our community and our viewers about these sort of things and debunking a lot of myths. I think that's important.
Thanks so much for having me.
So now I'm with Bally from Papyrus, which is a charity which helps young people specifically who are having suicidal thoughts. So Bally, Sat Sri Akal, welcome to the show.
Sat Sri Akal.
Bella, tell us what Papyrus does. What does Papyrus do a gear?
So Papyrus was set up in 1997 by a mom who had lost a son to suicide. So since 1997, we've continued to listen to those that have been personally touched by suicide. And the three things that we do now is we support, we equip, and we influence. So we support any young person who's struggling with suicidal thoughts through a helpline called Hopeline UK. And that's for any young person who may be struggling, they can give us a call.
Is it just young people, or what happens if an elderly person calls you?
Okay, so initially we are a young people's charity. So we support young people up to the age of 35. If someone calls us who's over the age of 35, we will still support them through that phone call, but we then signpost them to more relevant services.
What about people whose English is not the first language? Like our elders, some people are first generation migrants.
Yeah, definitely. So if English isn't your first language, you can still call us, and we have language line that we use, so that call can get translated with interpreter service.
Okay, so why do people take their own lives, and what are the contributing factors that build up to that moment?
Okay, suicide is very complex, and it's rarely a result of a single factor. So there can be lots of things that can contribute to someone wanting to end their life. So we know, for example, if you've lost a loved one to suicide, you are then at greater risk. There can be lots of other factors that can contribute to that. We know that people that have had marital breakdowns, family problems, there could be things that are going on into that person's life that can be contributing factors. And for many people, when all these things are going on in their life, they think that suicide may be an option for them.
And when people call you, what sort of state are they in, or what sort of situation is it? Is it a real desperate situation, or are they beginning to have these thoughts, or are they at the at the end, at the crucial moment?
So suicide is very individual and it's very unique. So when people call us, we believe that there's a part of them that still wants to live because they're reaching out and getting the support that they need. So really, by speaking to somebody, they're reaching out to that bit of them that still wants to live. So we know that we can support them to see other options and other choices. And you know, that little bit of hope, that there is that hope for a brighter and better future.
It's a very taboo subject, and there's a lot of stigma and myths surrounded around suicide. What are they usually? What are the stigma and myths surrounded it? And how do you tackle that?
Yeah, I think the biggest stigma is a lot of people think by talking about suicide you're increasing the risk, and that's not the case. By talking about suicide, you are giving opportunity for that person to reach out and get the support that they need. So often people are afraid of talking about suicide because they feel like they are going to encourage that person, but evidence is against that. If anything, you create that safe space for that person to reach out and get the support that they need.
Why do you feel it's so stigmatized, especially in the Asian community? Why don't we talk about it? Or, you know, why is it bad to talk about it? Why is it considered so taboo subject?
Yeah, I think it's a taboo subject in many communities, but I suppose within our sort of South Asian communities, it's a subject that we don't feel comfortable talking about, and it's almost something that we think that's never going to happen to us until it does. But we know that we need to break those barriers and the stigmas, and we're only going to do that by talking about it. And I can see that a lot of our ethnic minority communities are engaging with us. So we are doing a lot of work within ethnic minorities to break those stigmas and those taboos.
What sort of campaigns are you doing to raise awareness about what you do?
Yeah, so a lot of our campaign really comes from passion from individuals and communities, and also those that have lost loved ones to suicide. So our recent campaign, we've got bedtime stories, spot the signs and save the class. So our bedtime campaign was launched to look at online bullying. So we know that 40% of our callers, especially young people between the ages of 10 and 18, had highlighted that one of the contributing factors for them having thoughts of suicide was online bullying. So this campaign was launched to raise awareness around that. Our most recent campaign is Sinking Feeling, and that's a campaign that really highlights the heartbreaking reality that a lot of young people are suffering in silence without getting the support that they need. Sadly, a lot of our young people are feeling really sad, lonely and isolated, and this campaign really highlights encourages people to look at their signs and also reach out to those young people that might be suffering.
What are you doing to get your message across in the Asian community? ਤੁਸੀਂ Asian community 'ਚ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜੋ ਸੁਨੇਹਾ ਆ ਉੱਥੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਜਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਬਾਰੇ Asian community ਵਿੱਚ? What are you doing for that?
Yeah, so I work for the West Midlands, so a lot of my work is community work as well. So I'm trying to engage with our Asian communities to break those barriers. We know that suicide is all of our business, doesn't matter what community we come from, and we have been working really closely with faith leaders. We've been doing shows, we had a presence at the Birmingham Medlar, we've been going to radio shows, and also community events at Gurdwara and religious settings as well.
And what a response from community centres and community-based centres like gurdwaras, temples, masjids. Do you find that they're proactive, especially in a community where we perhaps don't talk about the issues such as suicide and domestic violence and other mental health issues?
Yeah,
do you find them receptive and proactive, or is it you who has to do a lot of the chasing?
I think I'm not going to lie, because I've been doing this work now for a few years, and initially when I started I found that was a really big challenge, especially going into gurdwaras and community settings. You know, it was a lot of me wanting to make that difference and say, look, I'm here to help, can we work together? But I think we've come a long way. You know, we have been invited to a lot of community events where we've had stalls and we've had a presence, so I feel like, you know, people are breaking those barriers and are willing to have those conversations now.
If someone wants to contact you, if someone's watching this and they feel, right, we need to reach out and we need to talk, especially young people, where can they contact you?
Yeah, I would urge, if anyone is watching this today and is struggling with suicidal thoughts, then I really want to say that you're not on your own. Please reach out and get the support that you need. Papyrus is here to support you. You can call us on 0800 068 4141. We are open every day from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. every single day. I feel like no one should struggle with suicidal thoughts on their own. So, you know, please reach out and get the support that you need. Also, if you're listening and you are concerned about somebody, you can also call us as well. So that line is there for a concerned other as well. So if you're concerned about somebody, just pick up the phone and please give us a call. we are here to help and save young lives.
Melly, thank you very much, and thank you for taking your time out to talk to us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
ਹੁਣ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਸੁੱਖਾ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਆ from the Sikh helpline, and ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕੁਝ ਸਵਾਲ ਜਵਾਬ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ and ask him a few questions about what the Sikh helpline is. ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਗਿਆਨੀ ਜੀ, we're neighbours for a start, Upper West Bromwich, but I've often heard from people that the Sikh helpline is doing good stuff, and then we decided to check it out for ourselves last time when we came here after your bike ride. And since then I thought ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹਾਂ exactly ਕਿ Sikh helpline ਹੈ ਕੀ, ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿਊਅਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗੇ ਕਿ what is a Sikh helpline, ਇਹ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਈ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ Sikh helpline ਕਰਦੀ ਕੀ ਹੈ।
Well, ਜੇ ਮੈਂ past history 'ਚ ਜਾਵਾਂ, the Sikh helpline been running more than 20-30 years.
Right.
ਤੇ when we started off the helpline, I also do a lot of Sikh Naujawan Academy youth camps.
ਜੀ।
ਤੇ ਉਸ ਯੂਥ ਕੈਂਪ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਵੀ ਹੈਡ ਓਪਨ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ, ਇਹ 90s ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ
ਜੀ।
ਉਸ ਓਪਨ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਇਫ ਆਈ ਕੈਨ ਰਿਮੈਂਬਰ ਦ ਟੋਪਿਕ ਵਾਸ ਸਿੱਖੀਜ਼ਮ ਇਨ ਵੈਸਟਰਨ ਸੋਸਾਇਟੀ, ਹਾਊ ਡੂ ਯੂ ਸਰਵਾਈਵ, ਹੈ ਨਾ
ਜੀ।
ਤੇ ਉਸ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਨ ਆਫ ਦ ਕੁੜੀ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਇਮੋਸ਼ਨਲੀ ਬ੍ਰੋਕ ਡਾਊਨ ਐਂਡ ਉਹਨੇ ਫਿਰ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਹੈਗਾ। ਸ਼ੀ ਬੀਨ ਬੁਲਿਡ ਇਨ ਸਕੂਲ, ਸ਼ੀ ਬੀਨ ਕਾਲ ਨੇਮਸ ਥਰੂ ਪੁਸ਼ਡ ਅਰਾਊਂਡ, ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੁੱਖ ਤਕਲੀਫ ਸੀ ਉਹਨੂੰ, ਐਂਡ ਸ਼ੀ ਡੋਨਟ ਨੋ ਹੂ ਟੂ ਟਰਨ ਟੂ।
Right.
She said, when I go to the Gurdwara, the Gyanis are ਸਿਆਣੇ, they do not understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰਬੰਧਕ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਿਆਣੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੋਤੇ, she felt lost. ਤੇ ਉਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਸੇ we telling them be proud of your culture values, be proud of who you are.
ਜੀ।
ਤੇ when they face problem difficulties and they turn around, there's no one helping them.
Yeah.
I know the Sikh community have done great jobs all around the world, have feed a lot of people, have support a lot of communities, wider communities. ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਮੈਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ why are we not doing anything for them?
Yeah.
ਤੇ ਉਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੇ I took the parents, the father was a taxi driver, the mom does, none of them know English well. So I took them to school, managed to resolve the bullying case. And the teacher took a strict action on it, है ना।
Okay.
ਤੇ ਉਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ if she's going through this, ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ 'ਚ a lot of other ਬੱਚੇ are going through the same thing. So I say ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੁਛ ਨਾ ਕੁਛ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਨਾ। So I just, without thinking it's going to be a national charity or registered charity, anything like that, I just printed a Sikh helpline piece paper, I wrote down I gave my house number ਨਾ ਜੀ, ਫਲੈਟ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਪੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਨੰਬਰ ਦੇਤਾ ਨਾ। ਅਸੀਂ if anybody facing any difficulties, bullying or racism or anything like that, just call us, voluntarily we'll come and help. ਜੀ। ਤੇ ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ ਕਾਲ ਸਾਰੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਆਉਣ ਲੱਗ ਪਏ ਨਾ। ਓਕੇ। ਤੇ ਐਂਡ ਦੈਨ ਮਾਈ ਵਾਈਫ ਸਟਾਰਟਡ ਕੰਪਲੇਨਿੰਗ। ਓਕੇ, ਯਾ ਹੁਣ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਫੋਨ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਫ੍ਰੀ, ਆਪਣੀ ਸਹੇਲੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਰਨਾ। ਉਹ ਭੱਜ ਕੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਹੈਲਪਲਾਈਨ, ਸਿੱਖ ਹੈਲਪਲਾਈਨ।
ਇਹ ਕੱਲੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਹੈਲਪਲਾਈਨ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਲਈ, is it just for Sikhs or is it for anyone can call?
No, anyone can call. Because ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਸਿੱਖ ਧਰਮ is such is the doors are open to anyone and everyone. And we do not judge, because ਮੇਰਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਵਿੱਚ if someone going through domestic violence or going through mental health, the religion doesn't matter.
Right, okay.
ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਖ ਹੈ, ਦੁੱਖ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ। So we are there, we'll support them.
ਦੁੱਖ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਂਝਾ ਹੈ।
ਸਾਂਝਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ। So we'll always support them.
And ਤੁਹਾਡੇ volunteers ਜੋ ਆ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਆ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਾਂ from other communities as well?
Majority of them are Sikhs. We had 1-2 different dharam also joined in. So really doesn't matter where they come from, as long they are willing to help and support. So we will accept them. Piche ja, when the COVID time then we had a lot of calls from non-Sikh. And then we were helping, giving out food through the Gurdwara from the helpline. ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਮੈਂ ਦੱਸ ਦੇਵਾਂ। ਜੀ ਦੱਸੋ। This we had from the local authority, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ name addresses ਭੇਜੇ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ food ਦੀ ਲੋੜ, support ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਨਾ। So this one lady, when I saw her name and date of birth, it was actually her birthday. She's 70 years old. The Chinese lady ਸੀ ਨਾ। So we were supposed to send some food for her in Russian money ਨਾ। ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ food ਦੇ ਨਾਲ I contacted the local cake shop. ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਮੈਥਿਕ ਦੇ ਲਾਗੇ ਨਾ। ਤੇ ਉਹ he was nice enough, he said, Singh, take the cake, don't pay me anything, it's a gift from me. So we sent the cake and the Russian pani to her.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, and the lady, the joy she saw in her face, she said, inne saal ho gaye, she's alone here, no family, she said, inne saal ho gaye, no one bought me a cake, and today I'm getting a cake. I don't know how to express myself ना
Wow.
ਉਹ ਕਾਫੀ ਖੁਸ਼ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਸੀ I'll share with all my neighbors ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਨਾ so ਐਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ cases ਆਈ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨਾ but we do get quite a lot of serious cases
ਜੀ
like suicide, mental health, domestic violence. ਜਿਵੇਂ ਮੈਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ one day I was in the office sitting down and I was quite shocked to see we had 2 suicide cases regardless other cases ਵੀ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਪਰ ਉਹ ਦਿਨ 2 suicide cases ਆਏ ਸੀ
ਓਕੇ
one ਇੱਕ ਦਿਨ ਚ and I'm thinking for having 2 cases in a day it's a lot ਨਾ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ we really need to do something. One lady was he had enough with life ਨਾ
ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਤੁਸੀਂ
ਅਚਾਨਕ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਹੈਲਪਲਾਈਨ ਨੂੰ ਘੁਮਾ ਲਿਆ ਫੋਨ ਨਾ so the administrator picked up the call while she's talking to her ਉਹਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਸ਼ਾਰਾ ਕਰ ਲਿਆ ਤੇ we managed to get her address. We called the ambulance and the police to the house to sort of safeguard her. That's the most important thing na while the volunteer was talking to her they managed to get her the police and the ambulance managed to take her to the hospital and give her full support. ਇੱਦਾਂ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੇਸਿਸ ਆਈ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਡੋਮੈਸਟਿਕ ਸੋ ਸਮਟਾਈਮਸ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਮੈਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਸੀ a lady get birth to a baby girl. She was thrown out of the house. They wanted a baby boy. And she was alone here. So we actually helped her. England ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ. So we actually helped her, supported her. We got other organization involved and she got a small flat. So ਚਲੋ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਗੁਜ਼ਾਰਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਊਗਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ with a baby ਨਾ but this kind of ਦੁੱਖ ਤਕਲੀਫ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੇਸਿਸ ਆਏ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੈਲਪਲਾਈਨ 'ਚ
ਗਿਆਨੀ ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਅਕਸਰ ਜੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਧਰਮਾਂ 'ਚ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਧਰਮ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਲਓ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਤਮ ਹੱਤਿਆ ਜਾਂ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਿਖੇਧਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਯਾਨੀ ਮਾਰਾ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ that it puts people off phoning people of religion for help or what does actually our religion say about these things? What does religion say about these things?
You see, I think every religion say the same thing na because ਜਿਵੇਂ ਆਪਾਂ we say ਸਭੇ ਮਨੁੱਖ ਇੱਕ ਪਿਛਾਂ ਨੂੰ recognize all human race as one so do not differentiate them. Actually in ਆਪਣੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਘਰ 'ਚ we always treat everyone equal. You can be different race, caste, whatever you come from. Even if you're having mental health, you're having any issues, they all should be treated the same. But I think this just a taboo thing in our community. Some of them still do not understand. ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿਆਣੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਐਦਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਦਿਮਾਗ ਪਾਗਲ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਉਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਗਲਤ ਹੈ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪਾਗਲ ਬਾਜਾ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਗਲਤ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਖੀਰ ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਸ਼ੁੱਡ ਬੀ ਸਪੋਰਟਿੰਗ them, we should be helping them. ਭਾਵੇਂ ਅਲਕੋਹਲਿਕ ਵੀ ਬੰਦਾ ਆਵੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਹੈਲਪ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਦੇ ਆਰ ਸਟਕ
ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੁੱਟਣ ਨੂੰ ਫਿਰਦੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕੁੱਟੀਏ ਕਿ ਆ ਕਿਉਂ ਗਿਆ ਰਾਤ ਦਿਨ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛੀਏ ਕਿ ਭਾਈ ਤੇਰੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਕੀ ਆ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਦਵਾਈਏ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਿ ਤੂੰ ਇਸ ਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਆਇਆ I think a lot of lack of understanding ਥੋੜੀ
lack of understanding that's definitely
ਇਹ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਜੀ ਦੇਖੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੀ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਸੁਸਾਈਡ ਪ੍ਰੀਵੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਬਾਰੇ ਆ ਐਂਡ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਅਨਫੋਰਚੂਨੇਟਲੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਲੋਕ ਆ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਅਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਵੀ ਸੁਸਾਈਡ ਕੈਰੀ ਆਊਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਇਸ ਹੱਦ ਤੱਕ ਦੁਖੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਕਿ ਯਾਰ ਕਿ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਖਤਮ ਹੋ ਜੇ ਅਕਸਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਚਾਅ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹਾਇਤਾ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਪਰ ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਡਾ ਵਿਊਅਰ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਦੁਖੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਰੀਚ ਆਊਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਕਿੱਧਰ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਵੇ ਕਿਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੇ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਸਲਾਹ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ if someone's actually sitting there contemplating this what would you say to them?
Well, my biggest message to all of them out there is first thing of all, don't feel you're alone.
Right.
We all are here to help and support you, no? And a lot of people are going through it. It's important to talk. ਤੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਦੂਜਾ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ because what we realize from the helpline, male is more calls coming in than ladies. Because ladies ਚਲੋ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਬਾਤਾਂ ਕਰਕੇ they manage to sort out themselves. But ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਬੰਦੇ they don't want to talk. So the Sikh helpline is here. We are a confidential helpline. When you call us, whatever you mention to us will be all confidential, and we are here just to help you. We don't judge you. We don't question you. We give you the support, whatever we need.
ਮੇਰਾ ਦੇਖੋ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਇਹੀ ਹੋਗਾ ਦੇਖੋ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਅੱਛੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਚੈਰਿਟੀਆਂ ਆ who help people physically ਹੈ ਨਾ and mentally and are there for people. And these charities need to grow. This is what we need to invest in. Appa, as a religion, as a community, we need to invest in this. It's very good कि ਆਪਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਘਰ ਬਣਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ and statues ਬਣਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ but actually physically and mentally these people जो charity वाले काम कर रहे हैं साडी community ਨੂੰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ and we should think about investing in them and giving them funds so they can spread their good work and help a lot more people. Asli seva ta eh hai ji. As much as if I feel down or you feel down, looking at a statue isn't going to help us. Looking at a big building isn't going to help us. We need someone to talk to and we need someone jo sadi baah fare. And that's what Sikh Helpline does. Main ta hi kahunga ki look them up. If you want to volunteer for a cause, then Gyani ji will more than happy accommodate volunteers.
Definitely.
ਇਹ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਇਹੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਚੈਰਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਪੁਸ਼ ਕਰੀਏ ਆਪਣੀ ਵਨ ਸ਼ੋ ਤੇ ਤਾਂ R1 ਸ਼ੋ ਤੇ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਵੈਟਿਡ ਹੋਵੇ ਟੈਸਟਡ ਹੋਵੇ not only ਆਪਾਂ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਗੇ ਮਿਲ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹਾਂ but I'm in West Brom ਆਪਾਂ ਰੋਜ਼ ਹਰ ਹਫਤੇ West Brom ਆਈਦਾ and there's ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਇੱਕ ਗੁਰੂ ਘਰ ਚ ਬੇਸਡ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ don't take my word for it ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਵਰਕ ਦੇਖੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਦਫ਼ਤਰ ਆਓ ਦੇਖੋ ਕੀ ਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਹੈਲਪ ਕਰੋ ਆਫਰ ਕਰੋ and you know perhaps one day you can say you know what along with the Sikh Helpline I helped to save a life that I helped to do this and ਉਹਦੇ ਵਰਗੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਕੋਈ ਨਹੀਂ you could be saving a little kid's mother you could be preventing a child's family from being separated you could be preventing somebody being abused domestically or you could just be helping someone out fill out a form and sorry from seva that is endless
every small help is great help na ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਸਿੰਪਲ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਦੇ ਦੇਵਾਂ ਜੀ we had a call on a lady going through very bad time on domestic violence ਜੀ ਤੇ so while we helping her ask her where did you get our information she said I don't know she said I opened my handbag and I found my Sikh Helpline card in there
wow
and I said how did the card get in there she said I don't know then मैं बैठ के सोचा ऐसे most probably some सेवादार in the Gurdwara started giving out cards while she was passing ਉਹਨੇ ਚੱਕ ਕੇ ਬੈਗ 'ਚ ਰੱਖ ਲਿਆ but that सेवादार he doesn't realize that he actually saved a life.
He saved a life.
Yep.
He saved a life.
So every small seva is important. If you are professional in a certain skill, you're most welcome to come and join the helpline because like I always say, volunteers, they are the backbone of the helpline. Without volunteers, we cannot survive.
Gyani, thank you for talking to us today. And most importantly, thank you for the seva that you're doing.
You're most welcome.
Look them up, Sikh Helpline, try and support them out as much as you can. And like we said, that you're actually contributing physically and mentally to somebody's well-being. You're helping them through their passage of life. And we all need help at some stage. But the main thing is, jadon sanu help chahidi hai, we need to reach out and koi sadi baah fadan wala hove. And thankfully for us, Gyani and the Sikh Helpline are always here for us. Gyani, thank you very much.
Okay.
Waheguru
ji ka khalsa, waheguru ji ki fateh.
Hanji, so now we're going to talk about a topic which is often asked of people like me, and I'm going to introduce you to someone who actually specializes in that, and that's the topic of finances. So what happens to finances after a person passes, how their family can deal with it. We've got Pooja Chandrana here today with us, who's a partner in the practice in Jairam Financial Services. So Pooja, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Pooja, in cases where a family is left behind because someone is bereaved by, or someone has been gone through suicide, how is the death registered? Is it registered in the same way that we would, like I'll go online on the government website or walk into a registry office and get a time from them? Or is it a different procedure?
No, so it's an entirely different procedure. Whereas, in any other deaths, it would be the family member potentially registering that death. When it comes to a suicide, it's actually the coroner that would be registering the death. And that can actually take some time because we do need to go through an inquest before the death is finally registered. The inquest can take several weeks or even as much as months or even a couple of years. Really? Yeah. However, an interim death certificate can be registered, and that will enable loved ones to arrange funerals.
So Pooja, how important is it that someone makes a will, and what happens in the event of someone has made a will or hasn't made a will? What happens to the finances or assets?
Okay, so it's really important that people do make a will. If a will's not been made, then the rules of intestacy apply. If a will has been put in place, then the executor of the will is responsible of ensuring, firstly and foremost, that any taxes that are due or any debts that are outstanding, the executor is responsible of making sure those have been paid. And then any assets left over are distributed according to the will. But obviously if a will's not been made, then it would be the administrators that would ensure that the intestacy rules are carried out.
And what about property? So a lot of people, this is quite an important question, and you must get it asked all the time because Asians invest heavily in property. So like houses that they live in, all their houses on rent, next door usually, which Asians always buy. And so what happens to the property when somebody passes away?
So there's two ways of owning a property. You've got your joint tenants, joint tenancy, and then you've got tenants in common. So if somebody's got a property where it's owned as joint tenancy, and if that person were to die, then the surviving partner, or should I say the owner of that property,
shareholder,
would automatically inherit that property.
Okay, so say if me and you owned a property together, so Hijab and Pooja buy a flat together, something happens to Hijab, then, and we owned it as in joint tenants. It's all mine. It's all yours. That's right. That's why I'm never going to buy a property with you, Pooja. That's the first thing. So despite the fact that I might be married or have kids,
it's all mine.
It's still all yours,
It's all mine, yes.
Damn. Right. Okay. And what happens in a tenancy in common?
Tenants in common. So we would own it in shares. If you were to die, your share would fall into your estate, and it would be distributed according to
either my will or the
right.
intestacy laws,
Yes.
right? So then
potentially I won't get it all in that case.
You wouldn't get it all, but my relatives would get it. But if in my will I'd left it to you, then you'd get it.
Definitely.
Pooja, in cases of suicide, a lot of the time we see, after we do the research, that there are lot of problems people are facing, and one of them is debt. And people seem to think that it's a way out. There's a big misconception in our community that if a person dies, then the debt dies with them. I mean, is that true? I mean, what actually happens to all the debt? So if something happens to me and I owe £500,000, would that £500,000 be okay? Would it be wiped off and, I wouldn't owe it to them anymore? What actually happens for cases of debt?
No, so usually debts do form part of the estate, just as assets would. Okay. So if somebody dies and, their assets are worth £1 million and there's debts there.
And you owe £500,000.
Yeah.
Then that money has to be paid back from your estate, from your assets.
That's right, yeah.
Even though you're no longer here.
That's right, yes.
So that's really important. We need to, the point is that when you pass away, your debt doesn't automatically pass away. Whatever's left behind, they take the debt out of that.
It forms part of the estate.
Right, so, and then you have to pay your taxes, and because the first thing you said is taxes, right?
That's right, and it's the executor or the administrators, they would be responsible of ensuring that's done.
So a lot of the time, then, suicide perhaps isn't a way out of debt. No. It doesn't guarantee anything, right?
No, and often people take out insurance policies, thinking that, once they've taken their lives, the insurance policy will pay out to their loved ones. There's often clauses on these life insurances as well.
Really? So
That's
insurance
right.
policies are, like, they know about this sort of thing that
people
do?
Yeah. There's insurance companies that won't pay out in the event of suicides, and most of them tend to have a 1 or 2 year clause. So once you've taken the policy out, you would need to survive. You'd need to live for 1 or 2 years, potentially, before any claim would be paid out.
Pooja, we've talked about finances and property, but there's something that we often forget, and that's pensions. So the person who's passed away, he might have been working in 5-6 jobs, might have pensions, but obviously he's not around to claim them anymore. But where are those pensions, and how does a person claim them? Can they be claimed? Does it go to the government? What happens to them?
Yeah, so approximately 6 years ago, a new service was launched, the pension tracing service. You can find that on the direct.gov.uk's website.
What does that let us do?
It enables people to trace their old pensions. So, as you can imagine, you know, somebody that's been working all their life may well have several pension pots from old workplaces that they've worked at. What the pension tracing service allows you to do is go back and enter some basic information, and you'll be able to trace your old pensions.
Wow.
When this service was launched 6 years ago, there was approximately £400,000 worth of unclaimed pension funds around. Today, 6 years fast forward, there's approximately 20 billion.
20 billion pounds of unclaimed pensions. So you're telling me 20 billion pounds is sitting there in pensions with employers that they owe people who have passed away or their families, and that can be claimed, but people haven't claimed it yet.
And often people, you know, so married couples, you know, some people don't know about their deceased spouse's old jobs where they worked and whether there was pension plans in place. So that's definitely something that I would recommend everyone does. You know, even those that are still here, it's not just for those that have passed away. If you think that you've got old pensions, it's worth tracing them through the pensions and
you just,
service.
all you've got to do is go to the website and put basic information in.
That's right, yes.
Pooja, thank you very much for coming here, and thank you for enlightening us. It's a very important topic. I know it's something that people probably don't want to talk about straight away after a bereavement, you know, or they don't want to be seen as labelled as money grabbing, or people are like, oh, all you're asking about is money, and or, you know, your relatives passed away literally a day, and after that, and all you're worried about is a house or property. But it's important to know, and more importantly for the person, you know, who perhaps is getting elderly, or, you know, is not feeling well, or have got health issues, then it's important for them to know all of this planning and have that in place. So thank you for coming and explaining it to us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all.
Thank you.
Suicide needs no introduction. We all know what it means. And we all know how hard it is when somebody takes their own life. But what we don't know is that 6,000 people a year take their own life. And out of them, mostly are men. They do it for a various of reasons. And this can be prevented if only we recognize the signs, and if only people reach out. It's up to us when somebody we see calls out for help, then it's up to us to extend our hand and to give them that help. The whole point of this show is to educate you as to how to spot the signs of somebody who is thinking about taking their own life. And if you spot these signs of drug abuse, alcoholism, feeling depressed, negative thoughts, then please contact any agency that we've mentioned before and help these people. Reach out and help them. It should never come to a point where somebody goes to sleep and thinks about never waking up. So please, please, as Lokano, these people, don't think of them as stupid, of pagal, of kamle, or a bimaria, a bajea. These are illnesses that can come to anybody. It's a temporary state of mind. And if you're going through it, let me tell you, it's a temporary state of mind. 1 minute you're down, 1 minute you're up. And we've all been through it, including me. And here's an example of somebody who's been through them stages. So मैं थानू ये कहूँगा जी that please go and get help. Realize that there's help out there. Reach out. Throw your arm out, somebody will grab it. And all I can say is that listen, you're valuable to us as you are, and by taking your own life, you won't solve any crisis or anything. All you do is leave a generation of sadness behind you. So please reach out, please get help. We can help you get through this. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching the show. And I wish you the best in mental health. There is hope. There is help. You're not alone. Please stay.